this one, I'm going to render out in layers. That way we can separate them in the compositor. So we're going to render out the background as a separate image. We're going to render out the house and all the objects as another, and the grass on a separate layer. So let's get started. So I'm back in my original file, pre the animation setup. So basically the windows are separate objects, the doors are separate objects, etc. What I want to do is render out this scene into 3 different layers. The first layer I'm going to render out is the grass out front here. The next is the background or the HDR image. And the third then is everything that's in between. So to begin this, I'm going to switch on the particle system. And what I want to do is select just the grass that's out front here, which are these guys here. And I might just press 7 just to get in closer to this one and select this grass here. So what I'm going to do is just move this to its own layer over here on 18 and just rename this to grass. So I'm going to press 0 to come back here. And if I come over to my render layer tab, we can have a look at this. So over here we have our scene layers, which correspond to these layers down here and also to these layers here. So anything that's switched on over here, you can see is switched on currently over here. These layers here are the layers that get rendered when we render our scene. So what I'm going to do first off is just rename this render layer up here to, we can call this one maybe house. And that's going to be our middle layer, our midground. So everything that's in between the grass and the background. So I'm going to click the plus and I'm going to rename this to background. And this will be the HDRI image. So I'm just going to drag this down a little bit and I'm going to click the plus, double click and just rename this then to grass. So let's take a look. So if I click on house, all the layers I currently have switched on, I want these to render. So all I need to do is to switch on the corresponding layers over here. So I'm going to click here, then I'm going to shift click and switch on all the corresponding layers that are actually currently switched on. And that's all you need to do really to switch on and ensure that all these layers render. Now just be aware that the HDRI image does render by default with the house with all layers, but we can switch off the HDRI image for the house and the grass layer by just setting the background to transparent. Okay, we'll do that in a moment. So the next one is the background. So for the background, all I want to do is just render this layer here, which doesn't have anything on it except for, I think, this doorway over here. So what I might do is press Z again, come into wireframe. I'm going to press 7, just zoom in over here and select these 3 objects and just move them then to maybe ground floor. Okay, I'm going to press 8 to deselect. I'm going to press 0 to come back to camera view. So what I can do is come up to this arrow and click it. It'll basically select any object that's on this layer. So there's currently no objects on it. So that's good. So I'm just going to come back to solid. I'm going to come over to my grass layer. And for this, I want this layer here to render. So I'm just going to come over and switch on this layer. So let's render out the house first. So I'm going to switch off or uncheck the background and the grass. And I can come over to my render tab. I'm going to come down the bottom here and I'm going to check transparent. I'm also going to reduce my render samples. I want this to render quite quickly, so I'm just going to set it to 50 and I'm going to hit render and I'll be back when this is finished. So when that's done, I'm going to come down here to image and save as image. I'm going to save this as house. I've already created one, but I'm just going to overwrite it. I'm going to hit escape and exit out of that and just come back over to my render layers, and I'm going to switch off the visibility of the house and just switch on the visibility of the grass. So with the grass selected here, I'm going to switch on the visibility of the grass layer so you can see it in the scene here. So the only layer that's going to render is our grass layer, and that's switched on here. So I'm just going to come back to my render tab. We still have transparent checked down below, and with that I'm going to hit render. And when that's done, I'm going to come down here to image, save as image, and rename this to grass.png. I can hit escape now to escape from this, come back to my render layers. I'm going to enable background and disable grass and click layer 1. And this is the layer I want to render. I'm going to switch on layer 1. There's nothing else on that layer, and that's the only thing that's going to render in the scene, and that's very important. But what we do need to do is, if I come back here to the render settings, I'm going to come down here to transparent and just uncheck this. Okay, that's important. We need to see the HDRI image. So if I come back up now, I'm going to hit render. And when that's done, I'm going to come down here to image, save as image, and I'm just going to save this as background. Press enter and save as image. Okay, I can come back here now, press escape. So in the next one, what we're going to do is bring these into the compositor, but otherwise that's going to do it for this one.